You did something this morning that determined the shape of your entire day. You did it before your feet touched the floor, before you checked your phone, before you reached for coffee or water or light. In that narrow corridor between sleep and waking, in those tender, unguarded seconds where consciousness had not yet fully assembled its defenses, you made a series of silent declarations about who you are, what your life looks like, and what today is going to hold for you. You did not speak them aloud. You did not write them down. You probably do not remember making them at all. But they were made. And by the time you stood up and walked toward the bathroom, the instructions had already been sent. The order had already been placed. And everything that unfolded from that point forward, every conversation, every feeling, every opportunity that appeared or failed to appear, was not random. It was a delivery, perfectly matched to the assumptions you were carrying before you were even fully awake. Neville Goddard understood this with a precision that still unsettles people who encounter his work for the first time. He did not teach positive thinking. He did not offer affirmations or visualization tricks wrapped in hopeful language. He taught something far more radical and far more dangerous to the way most people understand reality. He taught that your assumptions about yourself and about the world are not reflections of what is true. They are instructions for what becomes true. They are not descriptions. They are prescriptions. And the ones you hold most consistently, the ones running so deep in your psyche that you do not experience them as assumptions at all, but as simple, obvious, unchallengeable facts about how things are, those are the ones building your life with absolute fidelity, brick by brick, day after day, without ever once asking for your conscious permission. The morning is where this matters most, not because there is something mystical about the hour, but because the morning is when you are most psychologically naked. The defenses you build throughout the day, the distractions, the busyness, the noise you use to avoid looking directly at what you believe, have not yet assembled themselves. In those first moments of waking, you are operating from your deepest programming. Whatever rises to the surface in those quiet minutes is not a passing thought. It is your dominant state. It is the frequency that has been humming beneath everything, and it is the frequency that will shape what comes next. Neville was unequivocal about this. An assumption, though false, if persisted in, will harden into fact. Not might harden. Will. There is no ambiguity in that sentence. There is no room for perhaps or sometimes. The mechanism is absolute. The question is not whether your assumptions will become your experience. The question is only which assumptions you are feeding. There are 7 assumptions that, when held in the morning, when felt and inhabited before the world has a chance to overwrite them, create a shift so fundamental that the external rearrangement that follows can only be described as inevitable. Not because you performed a technique, but because you changed the soil in which your entire day grows. And what grows in new soil has no resemblance to what grew in the old. Let us walk through them, not quickly, not superficially, with the kind of depth they deserve. The first assumption: I am already the person who has what I want. This is the foundation. Without it, everything else is a decoration on a house with no frame. Most people wake up in the morning and within seconds they have already confirmed their current identity. They look at their bedroom and see the evidence of where they are financially. They feel their body and register the evidence of where they are physically. They think about their day and mentally rehearse the limitations they are about to navigate. And all of this happens so fast, so automatically that it does not feel like a choice. It feels like consciousness itself. It feels like simply being awake and aware of what is real. But Neville did not see this as awareness. He saw it as creation. When you wake up and immediately identify as the person who is struggling, who is waiting, who is hoping for a change that has not yet arrived, you are not observing your life. You are authoring it. You are writing the next chapter from the exact same state that wrote all the previous ones. And the next chapter, predictably, will read exactly like the last. The first assumption reverses this entirely. Before you engage with a single piece of evidence from your current reality, you assume the identity of the person who already has what you want, not the person who is trying to get it, not the person who is working toward it, not the person who is manifesting it, the person who has it, already, now, this morning. The version of you for whom the desire is no longer a desire but a fact of their daily life, as unremarkable and ordinary as the color of the walls. This is what Neville meant by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The key word is not wish. It is fulfilled. The assumption is not that you want something. The assumption is that the wanting is over. The arrival has already happened. And when you occupy that state, even for a few minutes in the morning before the old world tries to reassert itself, you are tuning your consciousness to a frequency that your external reality has no choice but to eventually match. This does not require pretending. It does not require lying to yourself. It requires a shift in where you place your sense of identity. Instead of identifying with the person lying in bed who still has the old problems, you identify with the person lying in bed who woke up into the new life. You do not need to know how you got there. You do not need a backstory. You simply need to feel in your body what it is like to be that person opening their eyes on an ordinary morning in the life they chose. The feeling does not need to be dramatic. It can be quiet, a sense of sufficiency, a settling, a gentle, deep exhale that communicates to your entire nervous system. It is done. I am here. This is who I am now. That feeling is not a wish. It is a command. The second assumption, what I desire is not on its way. It is already here. There is a subtle but devastating error that almost everyone makes, and it lives in a single word. The word is coming. When people say, my abundance is coming, or my relationship is on its way, they believe they are affirming something positive. But what they are actually affirming, what the assumption beneath those words communicates to their deeper mind, is absence. If something is coming, it is not here yet. If it is on its way, you are still waiting. And the state of waiting is not the state of having. They are as different as standing outside a locked door and sitting in the living room. Neville was merciless about this distinction. He did not teach people to anticipate their good. He taught them to assume it was already present, not arriving, not approaching, not manifesting. Here, now, in your possession, as tangible and ordinary as the pillow beneath your head. The second morning assumption asks you to collapse the distance between where you are and where you want to be. Not by doing anything in the physical world, by doing something in the only place creation actually occurs, which is your imagination. In the morning before the day begins, you hold the assumption that the thing you want is not in your future. It is in your present. It is woven into the fabric of this moment. You cannot see it yet, with your physical eyes perhaps, but you know it the way you know the sun exists on a cloudy day. Not because you can see it, because you can feel its warmth. This distinction matters because the subconscious mind, the part of you that actually builds your experience, does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you assume is true, and the difference between I want this and I have this is the difference between sending a letter that says, please deliver, and one that says, delivery confirmed. One perpetuates seeking, the other activates having, and the reality each one produces is as different as the two letters themselves. When you lie in bed in the morning and allow yourself to settle into the quiet, unremarkable contentment of a person who already has what they desire, you are not performing a visualization exercise. You are inhabiting a state, and the state, as Neville taught relentlessly, is the only cause. The world you see around you is the effect. Change the state, and the effect must follow, not because you manipulated the world, because you gave it a new blueprint. The third assumption, the bridge of incidents is already forming. This assumption addresses one of the deepest sources of anxiety for anyone who is learning to work with their consciousness deliberately. It is the question of how. How is this going to happen? How is the money going to arrive? How is the relationship going to appear? How is the health going to restore itself? The conscious mind demands a roadmap. It wants to see the steps laid out before it agrees to take the first one, and when no roadmap is visible, it panics, it contracts, it begins to doubt, and in that doubt, it abandons the very state that was beginning to produce results. Neville had a term for the sequence of events that carries you from where you are to where you want to be. He called it the bridge of incidents, and his instruction regarding this bridge was both simple and radical. You do not build it. You do not plan it. You do not need to see it in advance. Your only job is to hold the assumption of the end result, and the bridge will construct itself beneath your feet as you walk. The third morning assumption is the trust that this process is already underway. Before you open your eyes to face a day in which the path forward may appear completely unclear, you assume that the bridge is already being built. Events are already being arranged. People are already being moved into position. Circumstances are already shifting in ways you cannot perceive, but that are operating with perfect precision toward the fulfillment of what you have assumed to be true. Think of it like standing backstage before a play begins. You cannot see the audience. You cannot see the full stage design. You hear sounds of preparation, things being moved, lights being tested, positions being taken. You do not need to understand the mechanics of what is happening behind the curtain. You need only trust that when the curtain rises, the scene will be set. Your assumption of the end result is the script. The bridge of incidents is the production team. They know their job. They have never failed to deliver a set that matches the script they were given. This assumption eliminates the frantic need to figure everything out. And that elimination is not a small thing. It is enormous. Because the energy you spend trying to figure out how is energy subtracted directly from the state of having. Every hour you spend strategizing, worrying, calculating, and planning from a state of anxiety is an hour you spend reinforcing the assumption that you do not have what you want and that its arrival is uncertain. The bridge of incidents does not need your engineering. It needs your trust, and your trust is expressed by refusing to leave the end state even when the middle is invisible. The fourth assumption, I do not need to force anything today. This assumption will be the hardest for many people to adopt because it directly contradicts the operating system most of us were given. You were taught that results come from effort, that achievement requires strain, that the distance between you and your goal is measured in units of struggle. And so you wake up every morning with an invisible to-do list, not just of tasks, but of psychological labor. You must push, you must hustle, you must make something happen. And if you do not, you are lazy, you are passive, and you deserve whatever stagnation finds you. Neville's work dismantles this framework completely, not because action is unnecessary. There will be things to do today, but because the energy behind the action is what determines its result. Action taken from a state of wholeness produces outcomes aligned with wholeness. Action taken from desperation produces outcomes drenched in desperation. The external motion may look identical. Two people may send the same email, attend the same meeting, have the same conversation, but the state behind the action infuses every result with its own quality, the way water takes on the flavor of whatever container holds it. The fourth morning assumption is the decision that you will not force. You will act when moved to act. You will respond when something calls for your response, but you will not manufacture urgency where none exists. You will not generate friction as proof of your commitment. You will not confuse anxiety with productivity or tension with progress. This assumption does not produce passivity. It produces alignment. When you are not forcing, you become available to something far more intelligent than your conscious strategy. You become available to impulse, to intuition, to the quiet pull toward a conversation you didn't plan, a route you don't usually take, a decision that your rational mind cannot fully justify, but that your deeper knowing recognizes immediately. These are the movements that build the bridge of incidents, and they can only reach you when you are not drowning them out with the noise of your own striving. In the morning, before the day begins, you give yourself permission to move through this day without forcing a single thing, not because you are giving up, because you are giving over. You are handing the logistics to a creative intelligence far more capable than your conscious mind, and you are freeing yourself to be the vessel through which it works rather than the obstacle it must work around. The fifth assumption: my past has no authority over this day. You carry your history into every morning the way you carry your phone, automatically, without deciding to. You wake up, and the past is already there, sitting at the foot of your bed like a dog that never leaves your side. It reminds you of what happened last time you tried. It replays the failures, the rejections, the betrayals, the moments where you reached for something and came back empty. And its message, delivered with the quiet authority of lived experience, is always the same. This is who you are. This is what happens to people like you. Do not get your hopes up. Neville understood that the past has no creative power whatsoever. None. It cannot create a single moment of your future unless you carry it forward in your assumption. The past is not a force. It is a memory, and a memory has no authority over the present unless the person holding it grants that authority by continuing to assume that what was true then must be true now. This is one of the most liberating ideas in all of Neville's teaching, and it is also one of the most difficult to practice. Because your past does not feel like an assumption. It feels like evidence. It feels like data. It feels like the most reliable predictor available to you. And in the world of physical logic, it is. Patterns tend to repeat. Trajectories tend to continue. If you have been struggling for 10 years, the reasonable conclusion is that year 11 will look similar. But Neville was not teaching physical logic. He was teaching the mechanics of consciousness. And in the mechanics of consciousness, the past has precisely as much power as you give it this morning. If you wake up and rehearse yesterday's limitations, you are not remembering. You are recreating. You are taking the raw material of old experience and using your imagination to build it again, fresh today, as though it were new. The subconscious does not know the difference between remembering something and imagining something. The emotional and neurological imprint is identical. When you vividly recall a past failure, your body responds as though it is happening now. Your nervous system activates. Your state drops. And that state, that low, contracted, history-soaked state, becomes the assumption from which your new day is created. The fifth morning assumption cuts this chain. It does not deny that things happened. It denies their jurisdiction. It says, clearly and without negotiation, that today is not a continuation of yesterday. Today begins from the state I choose right now. The slate is not merely clean. The slate does not exist. There is only this moment, this assumption, this state. And the state I choose to occupy this morning is not borrowed from any chapter that came before. This is not denial. This is sovereignty. The past is a closed book. It does not get to write the page you are living today. Only the assumption you hold right now has that power. And right now, in the quiet of this morning, you choose a different one. The sixth assumption. Everyone I encounter today is reflecting my assumptions about them. This is the assumption that makes people uncomfortable. It is the one most people push back against, the one that provokes the strongest resistance because its implications are staggering, and yet Neville did not present it as a possibility. He presented it as a law. Everyone is you pushed out. What this means is deceptively simple and operationally profound. The people in your life do not behave independently of your assumptions about them. They cannot. They are actors in a play scripted by your consciousness, and the role they perform is the role your assumptions have assigned them. When you assume your boss is critical and dismissive, you will encounter a boss who is critical and dismissive. When you assume your partner is distant and inattentive, you will experience a partner who is distant, and inattentive. Not because these people have no agency, but because your assumption is a filter so powerful that it determines what you perceive, how you interpret, and what you energetically invite from every human being you interact with. You have seen this work without knowing what you were seeing. You have watched the same person be charming and generous with one group and cold and difficult with another. You have seen a co-worker who is hostile to everyone suddenly become cooperative with one particular colleague. You assumed this was about chemistry, about personality fit, about some ineffable thing that makes two people click or clash. But what if the variable was not the other person? What if the variable was the assumption held by the person receiving the behavior? This is not about controlling others. Neville never taught control. He taught revision of assumption. You do not change other people. You change what you assume about them. And when your assumption shifts, their behavior in your experience shifts accordingly, not because you hypnotize them, because you change the script they are playing in the theater of your life. The sixth morning assumption applies this principle before you encounter a single person. Before you walk into your workplace, before you sit across from your partner at breakfast, before you answer a phone call or open a text message, you hold the assumption that the people in your world are cooperative, supportive, generous, and kind. Not because you are naive, because you understand that your assumption is not a prediction based on past behavior. It is a creative act that shapes present behavior. You are not guessing what they will do. You are setting the stage for what they can do within the field of your consciousness. This requires a particular kind of courage. It requires you to stop keeping a mental file of grievances, evidence, and past offenses that you use to justify your negative assumptions about the people around you. That file feels protective. It feels like wisdom. It feels like the hard-earned caution of someone who has been hurt before and refuses to be caught off guard again. But that file is not protecting you. It is projecting. Every time you review it, you are rehearsing the assumption. And every rehearsal makes the next encounter more likely to confirm what you rehearsed. In the morning, you put the file down. You do not burn it. You do not pretend the past interactions didn't happen. You simply refuse to use them as the basis for today's assumption. You assume the best, not blindly, deliberately, with the full understanding that your assumption is a creative force, and you would rather create cooperation than conflict, generosity than withholding, warmth than cold. And then you watch. You watch what happens when you walk into a room carrying the quiet assumption that the people in it are on your side. You watch the subtle shifts, the softened tone, the unexpected offer of help, the smile where there used to be tension, not because they changed, because the frequency you are carrying into the interaction changed. And they, being reflections of your consciousness, adjusted to match it. The seventh assumption, it is done, and I am at rest. This is the assumption that contains all the others. It is the summit toward which the first six have been climbing. And it is the assumption that Neville considered the most powerful state a human being can occupy. He called it the Sabbath. Not the religious observance, the inner state of total rest that comes from knowing, with every cell of your being, that the work is finished, that there is nothing left to do, nothing left to fix, nothing left to figure out, that the creation is complete, and all that remains is to rest in the certainty of its fulfillment. The Sabbath is not a reward you receive after the manifestation appears. It is the very state that causes the manifestation to appear. This is the paradox that breaks most people's approach to conscious creation. They believe they will rest when it arrives. But Neville taught the opposite. It arrives because you rest. The resting is not the response to the fulfillment. It is the cause of it. Think of what happens when you place an order at a restaurant. You give your order to the waiter, you hand over the menu, and then what do? You sit back, you relax, you sip your water, you talk to the person across from you. You do not follow the waiter into the kitchen. You do not stand over the chef asking every 30 seconds whether the meal is ready. You do not keep pulling the waiter aside to restate your order, as though your desperation will somehow speed up the process. You trust that the order has been received. You trust that the kitchen is working, and you rest. But this is precisely what most people fail to do with their desires. They place the order through their assumption, and then they immediately stand up and follow it into the kitchen. They check for signs. They look for evidence. They ask the universe again and again whether it heard them. They restate the order in different words, wondering if the first version was clear enough. They worry that they ordered wrong. They worry that the kitchen is backed up. They worry that someone else's order is going to come out first. And every single one of these behaviors communicates the same thing to the deeper mind. It is not done. It is uncertain. It is still in question. The seventh morning assumption ends this. Before the day begins, before the checking and the seeking and the measuring and the doubting have a chance to start, you assume that it is done, completely, irrevocably, the way something is done when it is so far in the past that you no longer think about it. You do not wake up every morning and check whether your high school graduation really happened. You do not look for evidence that you learned to walk. These things are so thoroughly done that they do not occupy a single moment of your attention. That is the quality of doneness you are bringing to your desire. This is the Sabbath. And it is not a feeling of excitement. It is not a rush of joy. It is something far quieter and far more powerful than either of those. It is the deep, settled, almost boring peace of a person who has nothing to chase, nothing to prove, nothing to wait for. They are not anticipating. They are not hoping. They are resting. And their rest is the most potent creative act available to a human being because it communicates to every level of consciousness, from the subconscious mind to the furthest edges of whatever intelligence organizes this reality, that the assumption is not a wish. It is a fact, and facts do not need your anxiety to sustain them. They simply are. When you hold this assumption in the morning, you are not beginning your day. You are entering a day that has already been completed in consciousness. The events will unfold. The details will arrange themselves. The bridge of incidents will carry you through conversations and decisions and seeming coincidences that your rational mind could never have orchestrated. But none of this requires your interference. Your only role, and it is both the simplest and the most difficult role you will ever play, is to remain in the Sabbath, to rest, to refuse to leave the state of completion, no matter what the day presents, no matter what the old world tries to show you, no matter how loudly the evidence of yesterday argues that nothing has changed, because something has changed. The most important thing has changed. You have. The state you are carrying into this day is not the state you carried yesterday. And a new state, held with consistency and quiet faith, must produce a new world. This is not belief. This is law. And the law does not require your understanding to operate. It only requires your assumption. And your assumption this morning is that it is already done. Here is what Neville understood that separates his teaching from nearly everything else in the field of conscious creation. These 7 assumptions are not 7 separate tools. They are 7 facets of one diamond. They are 7 ways of describing a single shift, which is the movement from a consciousness that reacts to the world it sees to a consciousness that creates the world it assumes. When you assume you are already the person who has what you want, you naturally assume it is here rather than coming. When you trust the bridge of incidents, you naturally stop forcing. When you stop forcing, you become free from the past. When you are free from the past, you stop projecting old assumptions onto the people in your life. And when all of these assumptions are operating in concert, you arrive at the Sabbath, the resting place where creation is complete, and your only job is to live inside the reality you have assumed, even before your eyes can confirm it. This is not a morning routine. It is a morning revolution. It is the deliberate decision made in the most psychologically vulnerable and therefore most creatively powerful moments of your day to occupy a state of consciousness that does not match your current evidence. And that mismatch, that gap between what you assume and what you see, is not a sign that you are deluding yourself. It is the creative tension that forces reality to reorganize. It is the pressure that reshapes the external to match the internal. It is the very mechanism by which consciousness becomes flesh, by which the invisible becomes visible, by which the imagined becomes the actual. Neville spent his entire life teaching one thing dressed in 1,000 different examples. And that one thing was this: your assumption is the only reality. Everything else, every circumstance, every condition, every seemingly solid fact of your physical experience is a shadow cast by the light of what you have assumed to be true. Change the assumption, and the shadow must change. It has no independent existence. It has no power to resist. It is a shadow, and you are the light. Tomorrow morning, before the noise begins, before the old world reaches for you with its familiar hands, before the habits of yesterday try to drag you back into the same state that produced the same results, pause, lie still, and assume, not with effort, not with force, not with the clenched desperation of someone trying to convince themselves of something they do not believe, with the quiet, settled, almost lazy certainty of someone who knows. The way you know your own name, the way you know the sun will rise. Feel it in your body. Let it saturate the first moments of your consciousness. And then open your eyes, not to see the old world, to see through it, to see past the receipts of yesterday's orders and into the reality that your morning assumption has already set into motion. The world will not rearrange itself because you forced it. It will rearrange itself because you gave it no other option. You changed the blueprint. You held the new assumption. And the universe, which has never once failed to match the assumption of the one who holds it, will do what it has always done. It will say yes, and then it will prove you right.